Jason Vukovich, the Alaskan Avenger, whose notebook was the death note for pedophiles. Humans are programmed in a way that our physical afflictions are reflected in our personalities. When the trials of time test the frail bodies, the effects are obvious right on the faces. However, our emotional afflictions are the ones that are concealed deeply from the outside world. These are the ones only known to us and keep on poisoning our minds. These afflictions wrap our heads layer by layer and eventually chain us to an extent that we are not even able to breathe freely. This is a strange fact about trauma. It preys on our minds till we are no longer able to comprehend the difference between right and wrong. From the vantage point, we only seek an escape from the lifelong agony and direct it to something else just for the sake of relief amid lifelong suffering. Maybe that's why it's difficult to decide the nature of this case, which we are investigating today. Was that a consequence of lifelong trauma? Or was it out of personal interest? It's still difficult to figure out because sometimes what appears before the eyes isn't the whole truth, but the truth seems far away and dark as one tries to unravel it. Welcome to AF Crime, the channel that brings you fascinating crimes all around the world. If you're interested in this kind of content, then this channel is for you. Make sure to like this video, click on the subscribe button, and turn on the notification bell to keep you updated on recent uploads. Now, let's get right into the video and investigate more about this case, where the offender eventually seemed a victim because of his lifelong trauma. It was the summer of 2016 when 42-year-old Jason Vukovich finally decided to avenge himself. This was strange because his mode of revenge was unusual. He knew that he couldn't any longer put up with the trauma that was eating him alive, so he started making plans in his mind. By the middle of June, he knew what he had to do in order to seek his revenge. So today, he was here, right at the front gate of Charles Albee. He was waiting for him impatiently because he knew that what he needed to do would be ending in a few moments. After a series of repeated knocking, finally the 68-year-old Albee opened his door. When Vukovich looked at his face, it became increasingly difficult for him to control all his anguish, and he had no time to sparing a few extra moments than what he had aimed in his mind. He became quick and took hold of Albee. Without waiting for another moment, he started slapping Albee vehemently, and it seemed that all his anger was finally seeming way out through his hands. As his blows became intense, he became more ruthless. Old man Albee was still clueless about what he might have done to deserve this when Vukovich told him that it was the punishment that he was given to him because of his past crimes. Albee, who was known to be a pedophile in the past, now knew that he was at Vukovich's mercy, who kept on beating him violently and eventually left while taking away all of his money on the way back. This was how the crime journey of the Alaskan Avenger began. It was the first time in a long while that Vukovich had slept peacefully at night, knowing that he was finally giving the right kind of punishment to the heinous offenders. If you are thinking that he was content at this point, then correct yourself, because from this beginning, he gained all the strength he needed to start a hunt for justice, which he had not received in the past. Just 2 days after the first incident, he once again took hold of 25-year-old Andres Barbosa. This time he was not alone, but had taken 2 of his female friends alongside with him for filming and stealing. As soon as he entered, he started throwing punches at Barbosa while threatening to smash his head with the hammer in his hands. Vukovich further ordered his female friends to film the entire incident while he and his other friends started stealing bucks from Barbosa after carrying out a long episode of torture on him. As it was 4 a.m., so the neighborhood was covered in a veil of utter silence. Hence, Barbosa couldn't call anyone for help. When the gang was done, Vukovich left, taking Barbosa's truck along with him, and started contemplating attacking his third prey. His third prey, which later on turned out to be the latter one, was much more resilient than the first 2. Weasley Demarest was a man in his late 60s and was equally sturdy, so he chose to resist Vukovich's episode of torture. It was midnight and the neighborhood was blanketed with silence and darkness. Weasley's resistance turned out lethal for him as Vukovich struck him with a hammer upon refusing to bend his knees and sit silently. Just as he struck him with a hammer, he referred to himself as the Avenging Angel, who was there to avenge those who couldn't avenge themselves. This episode continued for a few minutes, and then Vukovich once silently stole Demarest's belongings and left. Every story has a climax, which is full of events that might not be liked by many, but are essential for the end of the long tale. Vukovich's tale of crime entered its climax the moment he stepped out of Weasley's and was quick to inform 911. Police instantly reached the scene. They didn't have to do a lot to hunt the perpetrator since Vukovich was still in his stolen truck with all the stuff which he had collected in a few days. They arrested him right from his truck and not only recovered all the stolen stuff, but with that, there was this red-colored notebook on which he had written the names of some past victims as well as the ones which he was going to attack after these 3 events. Well, this might seem a lot to you, and I know many of you will be relating Vukovich's hunt to Light Yagami's quest for justice. One must admit that the relevance between this real-life event and the anime series is uncanny, as both of them had a notebook with the names of the offenders mentioned. Yet, the Death Note had the supernatural power to kill, but there was a man who seemed to use all his physical power to end the unfairness and give the criminals an unforgettable punishment. At this point, things were equally confusing for the police as well, since they couldn't digest the fact of why an ordinary man wrote the names of 3 offenders and then attacked them. This seemed more intense than an ordinary crime tale. The purpose of the notebook was still unknown, so the initial investigations began. Following his arrest, he pleaded guilty to first-degree assault alongside attempts at a felony. During the investigations, what emerged before the police not only surprised them, but every single person was shocked. Vukovich revealed that he had kept the notebook entirely for noting down the names of the pedophiles who were still free and not convicted by the law. He further mentioned that he got the names from the Alaskan Sexual Criminals Registry and thought of avenging those monsters on his own. During his trial, he told about his own life, and those bone-chilling details explained why he had become the kind of person he was now. So let's move to what Vukovich told before the court. Vukovich belonged to Anchorage, Alaska. His childhood was not like every other child, but he was a journey of continuous self-hatred and low self-esteem. It began when their ideal family of 3, Vukovich, his younger brother Joel, and their mother, were devastated when the mother of the boys decided to get married to Larry Lee Fulton. Fulton apparently seemed a very good-natured and religious man, but the demon inside him soon started revealing itself after a few weeks of marriage. Jason was the elder of the 2 boys, so Larry often took him along to church with his mother. For the few initial weeks, Jason was only thinking that his parents were dedicated churchgoers, and this was the way every normal family worked. Later, Larry started molesting him continuously for a period of 6 years, and some of the molestations took place during the midnight masses at the church where Larry took him and told him that this was a way to pray. Soon, Vukovich started to realize that whatever was happening to him was not right. He couldn't focus on his studies any longer because his mind was still trying to grasp the nature of the incidents which were happening to him. Soon, Jason Vukovich wasn't the only one being molested by Larry. The younger brother Joel was also molested throughout these years. Jason recalls that if he refused to do what Larry used to say, he used to beat them both violently with belts. And once he had beaten Joel with such ferocity that eventually Jason had to jump on him to save his little brother. The brothers knew that if they continued living with Larry, they would ultimately end up dead. So for the sake of dear life, Jason ran from his home along with his brother Joel at the age of 16 from Anchorage. Though they ran together, their paths altered quickly. Joel once again started participating in life in an attempt to become a normal part of society. But time had flown away from Jason's hands, and now he was living in a shell of self-hatred, which made it impossible for him to look back at the normal society. He started hating people and took refuge in drugs. Soon, he started committing minor-level crimes. But this was just the beginning, because later on, he emerged as a big criminal whose crimes extended from the barriers of Montana, Idaho, California, and Washington. Part of the reason was also his hatred for the law and order system, which set his abuser free, despite a charge of child assault in 1989. Jason states that he realized how worthless he was and had to live like this all his life. Jason was sentenced to 23 years upon pleading guilty back in 2016, for the court believed that it was still not right of Jason to take the law into his own hands, despite what happened to him. The court further expressed sympathy towards his life story, but maintained the verdict since the jury believed that Jason's actions were a threat to the well-being of the community. Though the court initially passed a verdict of 28 years imprisonment, later on, 5 years was given the probationary status, and he was also given the right for seeking parole in 2023. Jason's attorney, Amber Stilton, believed that what happened to Jason was no less than punishment in itself, which wasted many years of his life, so he didn't deserve strict punishment at this stage. A similar stance was taken by Jason's brother Joel, who appeared before the court and testified to Jason's statement. He requested the court to have mercy on Jason and let him live freely because he didn't deserve any of what he experienced for years. He also recalled his own experience of battling trauma. He told the court that he couldn't take out the nightmarish images of years of molestation from his mind, even now when he is happily settled with a family of his own and holds a good job. He is still seeking therapy to escape from the gruesome shadows of his past. He requested the court to provide essential therapy to Jason, for he needed that to recover and move back into his normal life. In 2021, Jason finally started receiving the therapy which he hadn't received for all those lost years of his life while staying at the Spring Creek Correctional Center. After receiving help, Jason finally came to accept the fact that what he did was wrong and that he shouldn't have done that. In the same year, he wrote a letter to the Anchorage Daily and shared that he doesn't want people to look at him as some hero because he had no right to commit normally wrong acts in order to prove his point. He further discussed that his decisions led to his own downfall, for he couldn't accept the fact that he was molested for years. Masses spoke in favor of him alongside Ember because they believed that Jason was innocent throughout. They led to a debate all over the social media circles where many stressed the fact that Jason's act was out of sheer trauma, for the law and order system failed to provide him any support throughout these years. There was a petition started on change.organization in 2020, which stated that Jason should be released from imprisonment because he's innocent. Thousands have signed the petition from that time and hope that he would be released sooner than later. But this case leaves a very important question for us. What Jason did was morally wrong, but what is the state actually doing to convict pedophiles, which are running freely among us? It's natural that when a person suffers silently for years and their life gets devastated by the open wounds of their past, they can never move forward in life. They are always stuck in the past, just like Jason, and this leaves no other choice for them than to seek revenge for their agony on their own. Child abuse is the gravest of all crimes because it leaves permanent scars on a person's personality for which one can never get rid of. Protect your children because they are the assets of the future rather than leaving everlasting traumas. We need to provide an environment that is friendly and encourages the innocent angels to grow and live their life of innocence at their full. If you feel that this case was an intriguing one, like this video and share it with all your friends. Also, subscribe to our channel, AF Crime, for finding out more shocking crime tales around the world. And if you have any criminal case that you'd like me to investigate, share it in the comment section below.